All right, so we know now that different atoms will bond together so that they can create an overall neutral substance. And in that process, we get ionic bonding and ionic compounds. Well, today we're going to take that to the next step and figure out, okay, once we know that these are bonded together, what's the formula of that new substance? Because when those atoms are stuck together or bonded, they now create a new substance with new properties, and we need to be able to represent that and what atoms are in that compound. So we call those ionic formulas, and there's just a couple of easy steps to get you to be able to write them. Okay, so 3 easy steps, and you're going to want to write these down in your notebook. First one, you got to identify what ion is formed by each element that's being involved in the bonding. Okay, which we learned how to do in your ion formation notes. Okay, once you know what ions are going to be there, you need to determine how many of each you're going to need to create a neutral compound. And this is going to happen in lots of different ratios, which you learned in your ionic bonding activity. Okay, from there, depending on how many you have, you need to be able to write the formula based on the ions present. Okay, so let's just walk through a couple of examples to try this out. First of all, we need to be able to identify the ion formed by each element. We learned, and you have this picture in your notebook as well, that everything in group 1, when it forms an ion, will have a +1 charge. Group 2 will have a +2, and so on across. Group 8 does not form ions because they're already stable, so they will not form an ion. So, quick test on your ion skills. Lithium. Lithium is right here. So what ion is lithium going to form? You should have said lithium with a +1 charge, so Li +1. Okay, another one to try. Magnesium. Magnesium is here. What charge is magnesium going to end up with? Yep, a +2 charge, Mg +2. Try another one. Oxygen. Oxygen's over here. When it forms an ion, it will have a -2 charge, O -2. And the last one, aluminum, right here. When aluminum forms an ion, it will have a +3 charge, Al +3. That needs to be second nature in order to figure out the rest of this stuff. So being able to read your periodic table and find the charges, pretty easy as long as you remember what charges go where. And you should have this written on your copy of your periodic table. Okay, so here's an example. And we're going to work on step 1 for this example. Let's say we want to bond sodium and sulfur. Okay, so our 2 elements, sodium and sulfur, first thing we need to do is identify what ion is formed by each of those. So look at your periodic table and see if you can figure out what ion does sodium form. Sodium's all the way over on the left side, and you'll see that sodium, when it forms an ion, it will have a +1 charge. Sulfur, closer to the right side of your table, when sulfur forms an ion, it's going to have a -2 charge. Okay, so here we've completed step 1. These are the 2 elements that are involved in bonding, and we have figured out what ion each of those will form. Okay, so step 2 then. Step 2, determine how many of each ion is needed to neutralize. So the whole point of these ions bonding is that the new compound form will be neutral, meaning it will not have a positive charge or a negative charge. It'll have a 0 charge. So if you look at this right now, if we were to have one Na plus and one S -2, would that be neutral? Well, you have +1 and -2. Overall, that would have a -1 charge, right? So no, we need some more positives here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another sodium ion. Okay? So now, overall here, we have a +2 charge. +1, that's a +2. Over here, we have a -2. Since we have a +2 and a -2, that will neutralize. Okay, that will equal out to have a 0 charge. So now we know, okay, we've taken care of step 2. We know how many ions of each are needed to neutralize. We know we need 2 of these and 1 of these. So we can move on to step 3. Step 3 is just to finally write that formula. Now, you've been doing formulas for a while this year, so this isn't brand new. So you go, okay, how many sodium ions do we need? We need 2. 1, 2. So you write that Na2, and that 2 down there represents that there's 2 Nas. How many sulfurs do we need? We just have 1 there, so we just have 1 in our formula. Okay, and remember, we don't write the 1 there. We just assume that it's 1. There's your formula. So when sodium and sulfur bond, the formula that's produced is Na2S. Okay, let's try another example. Oh yeah, always you're going to want to write your cation first. We talked about it in your last notes as well, but that's just a little reminder. So your cation, which is Na1+, remember cation is positively charged, that always gets written first in your formula. And anion second, which is sulfur. So here's your other example. This time we're going to bond aluminum and oxygen, and we want to figure out what formula they're going to create when they bond together. Okay, so let's list our 2 things we're going to bond. First thing we need to do, step 1, is determine the ions formed by each. So you look at your periodic table, and when aluminum forms an ion, it's going to form Al plus 3. When oxygen forms an ion, it'll form O minus 2. All right, good. We got our ions figured out. Now we got to figure out how many of each we need to become neutral. So you look at this and go, okay, is it neutral? That's the first thing you should ask. Sometimes you just need 1 of each. But in this case, we have plus 3, minus 2. We have an extra plus charge, right? So that's not neutral because these are not equal. Okay? So what do we need more of? We need more negatives, right? So we better add another oxygen ion. So now we have plus 3, and we have minus 4 total over here, right? Minus 2 and minus 2 is minus 4. So now we have too many negative charges. So what do? We add another copy of our aluminum ion. All right. Well, now total over here is plus 6. Over here is minus 4. So now we're short on negatives again. So we come over here and we add another oxygen. And then you look and you go, okay, minus 6 plus 6. Now we're equal. All right, so how many aluminum ions do we have? And how many oxygen ions do we have? Well, you can see we have 1, 2 aluminum ions, so that'll be Al2. And we have 3 oxygen ions, so that's O3. So your final formula for when you bond aluminum and oxygen is going to be Al2O3. And that's pretty much all there is to it. If you have any questions, please ask. Otherwise, you have a practice sheet in your notebook to complete at this point.